Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and feel free to put a question into the question bar. And if you want to just say where you're from, that's also welcome, and to share a greeting with all your virtual friends on the site. We like to hear, all over the world where everybody's from and just say hello. It's great. We're not encouraging too much of a sidebar conversations, but just to have a nice community feel. And you're all in different time zones as well. And we recognize that some of those time zones will be a little brisk early in the morning, and some of them will be late at night. Part of our strategy is to set up a time. So it's 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time, West Coast Pacific time. And we chose that because we figure most of North and South America and most of Europe is in a reasonable time zone. I think maybe New Zealand and Australia are a little bit early in the morning. Bit of a sacrifice there. Okay, so let's start with the first question, Metta.
Yes, Ajahn. The first question from the live chat is from Ryan from the Peruvian rainforest. Dear Bhante, can an alcoholic's thirst for drink be quenched by practicing Buddhism? If so, and at what stage of the Dhamma penetration would one leave alcohol behind?
Yes, that is what we want. It's when people withdraw from drugs and dependency on alcohol. And by the way, alcohol and drugs are just one kind of dependency. There's all kinds of others, even extreme sports or addiction to these video games and all kinds of addictions and dependencies. That's the whole point of the exercise, is to overcome the thirst. Now, thirst is a very interesting word, and there is a Pali word which corresponds to that, and it's tanha, T-A-N-H-A, tanha. And there are three kinds of thirsts. There is vibhava tanha, bhava tanha, and kama tanha. Let me start with kama tanha. So this type of kama is not karma. This is K-A-M-A. When I use the word kama in normally, and I'm talking about the equivalent of karma, it's K-A-M-M-A, and this one is K-A-M-A, tanha. And it is the thirst for sensory experience, that is sights and sounds, smells, taste, touches, and the inner life of the mind, the thirst for ideas and new kinds of thoughts, and the play of thought, discursive activity. These are sensory thirsts. And then we have this other one, bhava tanha. Bhava means being, and it sometimes can be translated as becoming. Bhava, to be, to exist, to become, can be a thirst. And of course, we have most beings have a thirst to stay alive. So you have a thirst to continue to exist. The thirst for existence. It manifests in other ways, though. To have an adventure, to feel alive, to further your life, to deepen your life, to stabilize your life. These are being thirsts. The thirst to be and become. And then there's the other one, which appears every now and then and is curious to those who are thirsting after being, and that is vibhava tanha. So V means not, to cease from being or becoming. And so one of the graphic forms of that is suicide, self-destruction. There are variations on this. The most obvious one is when one kills oneself. But there's other ways of unbecoming. One is simply to sleep, Another way is to take intoxicants which cause unconsciousness. So these are the three kinds of thirsts that beings are motivated by. The Buddha is proposing that these all just don't have final resolutions. They're not satisfactory. None of the three are satisfactory, and that we seek some sort of release from the drives, from these driven thirsts. So in ordinary, a person who is not deeply philosophical and is simply choosing between these thirsts and drives. And it's not a pleasant place to be. Whatever people tell you, quite often people can't describe how they're feeling, what they're feeling, and they have no idea what other people feel like or how they're relative to other people. This is the same with skills and intelligence. A person may think that they're intelligent or think that they're stupid, and they can be completely wrong about that. It's always comparative, isn't it? So these are the underlying drives behind the use of drugs and alcohol. So some people are addicted to just the tastes of fine wines and alcohol and so forth. Maybe also certain of the drugs, marijuana, cocaine, and all this, they enhance the sensory experience. So people take them to enhance the sensory experience. So they like to eat, they smoke marijuana, and then they have the munchies, or they like to watch movies or whatever. It's their primary drive is sensory experience, sensory thirst. And the drugs are simply enhancements for sensory experience. The next one is people take drugs for an adventure. They also eat alcohol. They go to the bar and so forth. They're not there really for the taste of the alcohol. They're there because it loosens up inhibitions. It may even be a status thing. So you sit there and drink special drinks and so forth, and it's a social element. So, but your primary drive there is becoming and being. And this type of person might prefer also accelerant types of drugs, cocaine and meth and so forth. Or you can stay awake for days. So you're in pursuit of being, enhancing your being, the sense of being. It may, in fact, kill your sensory experiences. You may not want to eat or anything like that. You just simply want to be awake and be experiencing new things. So, and then there's the third type. And so that one was bhava tanha, thirst for becoming or being. And then the third one is vibhava tanha, the thirst for annihilation. So that the person who is thirsting, whose dependency on alcohol is in order for annihilation, it will drink until they're unconscious. So the purpose of their drinking is to drink to disappear. And also they will gravitate to drugs, heroin and things like this that are conducive to the annihilation of consciousness rather than the enhancement of sensory experience or the continuation of life experiences. It is primarily to dull and withdraw from these things. So these are the three kinds of thirst. So each an alcoholic can be motivated by each of these three kinds of thirsts. They might be a person who reviews restaurants, fancy restaurants, and samples all the wines, 4 different types of wines in a meal, and they may not realize it, but they're actually very dependent on the alcohol. But it's a sensory dependency. And then the person who drinks for adventure, the whole idea of going to a bar where they have fun and stories and friends and so forth they can't imagine going there without alcohol because everybody else is using alcohol. And by the way, so when you use alcohol, it tends to it reduces your inhibitions. So you think you're funnier and smarter and etc. But also it reduces your intelligence. So if you're there sober, if you made a social life around drinking with friends and so forth, then if you decide to quit, it's rather awkward because everybody descends, their IQ drops by 20 points or so, and you feel the jokes aren't funny, they're not amusing, etc. So it's awkward to be there. So this is your addiction, your dependency is actually on the social elements of this, the becoming elements, the being elements. And then finally, the annihilationist motivation, the annihilation motivation for drinking is you'll drink alone, you'll drink to unconsciousness, you drink enormous quantities. Sometimes it's frustrating because heavy alcoholics also build up tolerance and they almost can't get drunk anymore. It's hard to get annihilated. So these can these be overcome? Yes, they can. All of them can be, because you have to inquire into the underlying thirst. So the person who wants to escape by unconsciousness. By the way, so this also occurs in depression. People in depression, they will sleep a lot. They'll try to sleep 16 hours a day. You can only sleep so much, and you just find yourself lying there very uncomfortably, tossing and turning. Your body is not meant to just stay in one posture. So it's a futile attempt. Some would say, if you have an annihilationist view of life, that at death you cease to exist, some would say, well, the escape then, annihilation is escape, you just die, and then it's satisfactory. From a Buddhist point of view, you don't die. You just go to another life where your problem, the underlying problem, which you want to escape from through annihilation, it has not been solved, and so the problem just appears again. This is Groundhog Day, if you've seen the movie or read the book. You try to get away by annihilation, but the morning comes. You got big problems. You're insecure in life. You're riddled with anxiety. You don't think people like you, and maybe they don't. Your job is overwhelming, and you feel like you can't live up to it, etc. So it's so painful that you need to drink to annihilate that. Also, heavy drug addiction. Heroin is, and what is the other one? Fentanyl, so forth. So you'll see people on the sidewalk. This is very famous. Before the flood of things like heroin came through, there was certain areas of the big cities called Skid Row and the Bowery. New York has the Bowery, and that, if you went there, it's quite staggering to see that this is where annihilationist alcoholics collect, and they They're just scattered on the sidewalk, passed out in dreadful condition. And they are attempting to annihilate some sort of discomfort. It's some sort of pain that is being dulled by the use of alcohol. When heroin came in, it was dulled by, it's even more effective form of dulling the pain. And fentanyl is as well. The roots of this in modern times, some of the theories around this is that trauma from this life, and trauma comes in many forms: childhood trauma, sexual trauma, violent trauma through violence, through war, etc. And the trauma creates such a distress that it's quite unbearable to be just sober and conscious. And so that the drug makes you feel safe, makes you feel out of pain. So it's painkiller. And this is part of every, old cowboy songs, that they drink to get over the pain of life, It's not a mystery. You got pain, and it's the medicine. I was at a monastery in West Virginia called Bhavana Society, and it's in a kind of a rural area, sort of hillbilly area, and there was a gentleman who lived in a sort of a shack and drank on his porch heavily every day. And sometimes people would, because it's an obscure area, sometimes people would stop and ask him where the meditation center was. And he always heard it as medication center. And he would raise his bottle of hooch, say, "This is the only medication I need." I don't know. So meditation is also an attempt to overcome all of these difficulties. The root pain that causes one to seek annihilation or relief from the pain. This is what meditation is. It's a restructuring of your views of reality. It changes also your relationship to bhava tanha, the thirst for becoming. So the addictions to seeking experiences or socializing and partying and all this kind of stuff also will fall away. By the way, so, there's what are called extreme sports, people dedicated to these extreme sports. Quite often that's where they're getting their relief from a kind of a problematic emptiness. So they're doing ultra marathons and free climbing cliffs and risking their lives, because when you're clinging to the side of a cliff without any ropes, you have to pay attention intensively to this present moment or you will die. And so guess what? It feels great. So they have discovered that full attention and mindfulness is the secret to overcoming their basic problem, but they connect it to putting themselves in dangerous situations where their life is at risk or perhaps injury is there. All of these things will fall away if you meditate and readjust your view of life. People who have meditated, sometimes they come out of this drinking themselves to unconscious, taking drugs to unconsciousness. The primary pain or the situation or the mental processes have resolved themselves, and the person leaves that behind. Also, the bhava tanha types that are pursuing all these experiences, going to bars and so forth. Also, when they meditate, they much to their surprise, they stop wanting to go to these places. And then the sensory thirst as well. People stop endlessly seeking the next sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, idea, because they feel peaceful. And so meditation and right view, when deeply established, all of the thirsts, the three thirsts, fall away. Okay, I've given a whole Dhamma talk on this, but it's really a very fascinating area, very important to know. There's endless groping around and trying to diagnose why people do these things. The least approved of them is vibhava tanha, suicide, and drugs to unconsciousness. The one that's quite often celebrated is the bhava tanha, where people are endlessly party animals or going on adventures, etc. That one is like, yeah, good on you kind of thing, but actually it's not revealing high wisdom. And then the last one is the sensory addictions. That not only is it approved of, it's quite often you form exclusive clubs. You form wine tasting clubs, art clubs, all kinds of music societies and everything. And this is your extreme refinements regarding these things are celebrated. And it's not realized that at the same time it's problematic. Sensory dependency, no matter how refined, has its downsides. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next question.
The next question is from Gustavo from Barcelona, Spain. Dear Ajahn, the Buddha often says, when the mind is freed from these 5 defilements, it becomes malleable, wieldy, and luminous, etc. I have always been struck by the term malleable and its possible connection to the modern concept of neuroplasticity. I would be grateful if you could share your thoughts on this topic.
Yes, yeah, it is related to neuroplasticity. We have a joke in the monastery because of this. The terms malleable and wieldy are very late 19th century Oxford English professor's translation of Pali terms. And we always felt that it sounded like 2 Swedish sisters, malleable and wieldy. So if you need to keep this in mind, you can think of two Swedish sisters named Malleable and Wieldy. And their brother Luminous. So malleable is, the Buddha gives a simile for this, is you must make clay malleable before you can shape it into a pot and spin it on the spinning wheel, the turning wheel for shaping pots and bowls and things like this. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, go watch a YouTube video about how people turn a block of clay into a bowl. And so they did. This is 5th century BC. They're doing it then, and they did it very, very well. So before you can do this, the clay is hard and not shapeable. So you have to add water to it and massage it until it becomes malleable, it's shapeable. And so we have to, in order to make our meditation successful, we have to get out of our rigid, repetitive, habitual types of thought patterns and activities of the mind, because it's stiff and habitual. So we have to withdraw into a quiet place, away from ordinary structures of life which trigger us into habitual patterns. So we go to retreats and so forth. We withdraw from the sensory worlds as well, from the world of sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touches and all kinds of conversation and ideas. And what we're doing is deliberately changing the mind. So we're deliberately reformatting the mind. We're trying to introduce new, in terms of neuroscience, new circuits are being activated in a very deliberate way, things that have not been used before. by depriving us of our normal externalization of like paying attention to the outer world of sights and sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas, by withdrawing from that, we are faced with a different experience in life. And most humans don't know about this. The only time they know about that is when they go to sleep. And the problem with being asleep is you're not conscious. So you can't restructure the mind in your sleep. So this is a deliberate withdrawal from the sensory experience. And it's also a withdrawal from the negative emotions. You mentioned the 5 hindrances, basically. So there's desire and anger, agitation, heaviness and sloth, and then doubt, unresolved, perplexing, annoying doubt. So you're undoing all of those. You're becoming aware of them and saying, no, don't follow that thought of anger, of irritability. Don't follow that thought of desire and craving. Don't follow that agitation. Reduce the agitation. Increase the energy so you're not slothful and heavy. And cease from perplexing yourself over this doubt. And so this is what you must do in order to make the mind malleable, so that you can reshape it into something that's beautiful and useful rather than a block. And wieldy means that you can direct it then. After you've reshaped it, you can direct it to purposes of clarity and understanding and wisdom. So what at first is quite a struggle against the ordinary processes of the mind, the elimination of these 5 psychic irritants of desire and anger, agitation, sloth, and doubt, you're redirecting the mind away from that. That's the ordinary mind. It's full of that all the time, into this. So you can shape this vessel and then use it to point it at certain clarifications about the nature of existence. So you're not working on distorted processes of the mind, the heart and the mind, the emotional element. Now your heart is settled and your mind is lucid and clear. So the last element is this word pavasara, or lucid, or luminous. Luminous meaning you're able to shine light on a subject. Now, it shouldn't be too confused with physical, like the appearance of physical light in the mind. Like if it was just luminosity of the mind in the sense of an internal light, it wouldn't be that important. But it's light, the light of understanding, the light of wisdom, shining on the experience of existence. So this is the nature of this. This is all explained in the approach to what we call jhana, the samadhi of the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path. Mindfulness's function is to arrange us to get to this state where we have eliminated the 5 hindrances and we have introduced, we've made the mind malleable and wieldy, and then luminous, the last thing, arises as well. So that's the context. And that is neuroplasticity. That can be learned and accomplished at any age. This is something that psychology in the late 19th century, earliest 20th century is quite often convinced that you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. They thought that the brain was, fully formed. That Freud and so forth quite convinced that by the time you're 3, that's it, And then in the 20th century, they discover, new growth can be produced in the mind at late ages. Buddhism always knew this. You'll find the record of people becoming monks and nuns late in life, at 80 years old, going off, meditating, and achieving enlightenment, breaking old habits, structures, by the deliberate practice of this. So your mind, your brain, apparently, is always capable of plasticity. It's a bad word. Plastic is a bad word, but plasticity means that it can be reformatted, reshaped. It's rubbery, in other words. It's flexible. Even in old age, you can undo old patterns and habits, and new growth can be produced. So that is the answer for that. Let's go to the next question.
The next question is from Michael from the chat bar. I can meditate quite deeply and occasionally get, I think, some samadhi. Nevertheless, I get discouraged by a lingering sense of boredom whilst meditating. I'm peaceful, but also bored. Any suggestions?
Yeah. So you need to redefine what peaceful is. Boredom is a form of aversion. So what you need to tell yourself is that you're not bored, you're irritated. And irritation is not does not coexist with samadhi. It doesn't coexist. It's eliminated by joy. So irritability, boredom, so forth, is replaced by this quality of joy. So when you're enjoying yourself, you're not bored, are you? And what does it mean to enjoy yourself? It means that something has caught your attention. You're interested. So this is how you would get over this. Your meditation is not just a kind of a blank sitting there. It's an intense interest, and interest itself makes life interesting. Life in itself is not interesting. Situations are not interesting. Movies are not interesting. Books are not interesting. You're interested, and then the book is interesting. And what is interest? It's paying attention with vital concern. So actually, if somebody walks into the room with a gun, you suddenly are very, very interested. You'll see people snap out of all kinds of drowsiness and doziness and distractions, and suddenly they're fully there. I mentioned before that's why people free climb cliffs or dive off 20-meter heights and so forth into water, is that you have to pay attention. It's critical, or you will either be injured or die. And so people think it's worth it, flinging yourself off of a 10-meter tower or a 20-meter tower. If you miss the dive, oh my goodness, it is dreadfully, it hurts. It's at certain heights it could even be fatal, but it seems to be worth it to them because they feel enlivened by this. So this is why they do it. They don't have to do that. They just have to sit down and meditate. But when you sit down and meditate, it's not a dull, slack-jawed kind of drooling ride in an elevator. It's of vital interest. You have to enjoy yourself. You flood yourself with joy through interest and attention. You make it as if it was life and death. And in fact, it is life and death. If you want to live freely, you have to enter into this state of samadhi with everything you have. And if you don't, if you're locked out of samadhi, if you're locked into the inability to pay attention, you'll be locked into a very unsatisfactory condition of life. If you're locked into boredom, it's very unsatisfactory. If you're locked into desire, it's totally unsatisfactory. If you're locked into agitation, terrible. Locked into sloth, torpor, depression, bad idea. Locked into riddled with doubt, bad existence. it's up to you to escape. You've been rounded up and put in a prison camp, and you have to risk your life to get out of there because it's miserable conditions. So it requires every bit of attention and focus you have, and you will be rewarded with joy rather than this kind of dullness or what you call boredom. Yeah. Okay, next question.
The next question is from the live chat from Philip. Dear Bhante, in Majjhima Nikaya 87, the Buddha tells a householder who is out of his mind because he had just lost his only son that pain and suffering is born from those who are dear. In Anguttara Nikaya 539, however, the Buddha states that a son is worthy of praise, among other things, if he continues the family lineage. How can these two statements be reconciled, and isn't it always better not to strive for kids and family, even as a layperson?
Yes, with the right motive. The Buddha gives advice, what is called relative advice, like how to improve the quality of people's lives. Because he realizes that very few people actually are aspiring to nirvana, Nibbana, the ultimate release from the rounds of rebirth. Most people are still quite interested in a good life and a good future after this life, so a good next life as well. And they just can't tear themselves free from these ideas. These are called attachments. And so the Buddha gives ultimate advice. But by the way, he says one thing. He says, I never speak in praise of samsara, ever. And that means samsara includes the heavenly realms as well. So he's not speaking in praise of the heavens, but he is trying to mitigate the relative suffering that people have. There is a decent life in the human life, so he tells you what the blessings of the ordinary life are. You stay away from negative people, foolish people. You find company with the wise. You find something that inspires you, a kind of virtuous person or a teaching that inspires you. Then you go on to cultivate skills and crafts and education, which will give you livelihood and will give you some social function. These are ways you can bless your life. And if you decide to have family, then you must take care of them with compassion. You must share your wealth and your skills with them. And you must, in fact, your relatives who are in need, you must help them as well. And you must, if you're an employer, you must be fair to your employees. And if you're an employee, you must be loyal and dedicated to the employer. You must show up for work. You must do your work honestly. All of these things, and you seek higher and higher things, and hopefully you seek instruction in Dhamma, and you bless yourself with that vision. So these are relative things. So the people's most treasured thing is, of course, their children and their parents and so forth. And because they're so dear to you, and because, of course, they're all subject to aging, illness, and death, and then you are subject to grievous loss as well. So this is true. The more some person you love, if you lose them, then it's intrinsic to that love that you will feel great suffering, pain, and regret. So that's the ultimate truth. The Anguttara quote that you said was that a son that carries on the lineage is a good thing, because that's the relative stuff. If you're not going to be a monastic and you're going to stay in the family life, then you have to do all of these things. And to have somebody in your family that carries on the lineage and gratifies you through children and grandchildren and all this kind of stuff, that's a great happiness, but it's a relative happiness. It's not the ultimate happiness. So that's to reconcile these two views. Yeah.
The next question is from Quasitor from Melbourne, Australia. Since Nibbana is beyond perception, there are those who conclude that witnessing Nibbana at the Sotapanna stage would be an unconscious experience rather than pure awareness without an object. Is this not an annihilationist view?
There are two kinds of Nibbana. One is the emotional reordering accompanied by the psychological release from from a viewpoint which entraps you. So there's the results of it. The opening of the eye, the witness of Nibbana at the first stage of enlightenment, is something that occurs in this life, and it registers throughout your emotional structure and your intellectual structure. The Nibbana that is said to occur at the death of an arahant is not that. That is beyond perception. People are endless talking about it to this day, and there's two schools of this. One holds that at Parinibbana, the final death of a fully enlightened person, that is the cessation, that's complete and final cessation. Others hold that there is some sort of continuation, which is Nibbanic, has freed itself from all suffering, but is kind of inconceivable. And indeed, it is inconceivable, and you can't perceive it. But the type of experiences of the stages of enlightenment while alive are fully talked about as in the 7 factors of enlightenment. So what constitutes the enlightened mind and emotional structure is, it's all positive. So mindfulness, inquiry into the nature of the truth, the energy, joy, tranquility, deep samadhi, and equanimity are the 7 factors of enlightenment. And the person starts to taste these and experience these as the wisdom eye opens. And so that's a direct experience of a moment of Nibbana. And it will, for the first stage of enlightenment, it will come and go depending on whether their hindrances are activated or not. By the way, so the first stage of enlightenment, people still feel anger and greed and so forth. But within a limited, it's not dangerously fueled. It will not result in in murder or stealing sprees or anything like this. It's contained. Person is a well-behaved citizen and stays within boundaries. So that's hopefully that clears up the mystery of this. Yeah.
The next question is from Sheila from Florida, United States. I am a quiet person, and being around excuse me. I am a quiet person, and being around loud people causes me to feel stressed. How can I get rid of this aversion?
Maybe you don't want to get rid of that aversion. You maybe want to get rid of the people who are loud. Stay away from them. We have to make choices in life. We don't have to just mix in with any old person, anything. It's not, our life is very precious. Our time is precious. Even though we may be working at a job where we make $8 an hour, and somebody who's making $10,000 an hour wants your time, but you can say to them, "My time is valuable." And if they say, "Well, it's only worth $8 an hour," well, that's not what I mean by value. I only have this life. It's extremely every second of it, every minute of it is valuable, and I have to choose. I don't. It's too valuable to throw away with people who are foolish. So you give yourself the blessing. The first blessing. This is an articulation in the Mangala Sutta, the Sutta on great blessings. The first one is not to associate with the foolish. You make choices, and maybe they'll be a little upset by it or whatever, but your life is precious. So you remove yourself from the association with the foolish, and then you find your way to wise association. And that, right now, as I'm talking, we're in the middle of a 10-day silent retreat. So the monastery is full of people who have chosen to leave behind their situations and come to the monastery, and they are going to spend 10 days in silence so that they can get something done, and nobody's shouting and blustering around, and that the people they left behind may be going to a rave or a party or something like this where everybody's shouting and laughing and so forth. That's the choice you make. You choose a different life, and if you're sensitive, it's a good sign actually that you're not comfortable with loud people. That you want to withdraw from this. Rather than getting over it, it's better that just follow the inclination to withdraw from it.
The next question from the chat is from Kolja from Belgium. Dear Ajahn Sona, taking into account the concept of non-self, anatta, the rejection of the Christian idea of an immortal soul, what exactly is it that gets passed onto the next life until Nibbana has been attained?
Well, it's just two concepts trying to solve a problem. If one does not absolutely cease at death, what goes on? Because we can plainly see that it's not the body that goes on. The body, every material aspect ceases. So if something goes on, the early idea was, the thought processes weren't all that sophisticated when people came up with this. So they called it a soul. It's very similar to pneuma or air, respiration or something like this. There's some sort of airy something or other that's the soul or whatever. But how would it go on? So, by the way, the Christian philosophers, sometimes people are coming from a Christian background, and the soul is very commonly mentioned and so forth. But they may not know that there are Christian philosophers, the medieval philosophers, who had to wrestle with the question, what is the soul? And they generally decide that it must be an unchanging monad, an invulnerable, imperishable single thing. So it's like a steel ball bearing made out of indestructible steel. And it rolls along along a ramp. You can imagine it rolling along a ramp, and the ramp drops off and another ramp appears, and the steel ball bearing drops onto the next ramp. So that's one way. But the Buddha, on contemplating this, and this was a theory of the soul also in northern India at the time. People speculated about this. They had all kinds of ideas. What is the soul? In Pali or in Sanskrit, the Atman, or Atta, the self, the soul, the essential soul. And the Buddha, scrutinizing this idea of like an imperishable monad, realized it's an impossible idea. The reason why because the soul couldn't be conscious. It couldn't have experience, because consciousness and experience are all processes. If it was an unchangeable, indestructible thing, it wouldn't be conscious. What kind of self is that? So he said there is no such thing as a self or a soul. There's no thing like that. But it doesn't mean that you cease at death. It means that basically you're ceasing every split second, actually. In order for processes to take place, they can't be solid and indestructible. They must be flows. They must be processes. So let's change it to the idea of a row of dominoes, that one domino hits the next one and knocks into that, the next one hits the next one. The first domino doesn't go to the end of the line. It only knocks into the next domino, and that one knocks into the next one. So it's not a steel ball bearing rolling down a ramp. It's a series of dominoes, thought moments, or some sort of process of moments. Even that is somewhat unsatisfactory. By the way, the what is called Abhidhamma, monks got together in groups and philosophized about this process, and they had great discussions about, well, what would this mind moment be? Is it a thing that knocks into the next thing, or is there any reality? Is there any thingness at the bottom of this? So some of them conclude there is little moments that are real and knock into the next moment or influence the next moment. And others say, well, no, it can't be a thing. It has to be all continuous processes which stop the mind. If let's put it this way, if there are no things at the bottom of this process, then what is the process itself? And this is where they come up with this idea of emptiness. This is the same puzzle and problem that the Greeks had actually with atoms. They decided that there must be something you cut a piece of wood in half, and then you cut that in half, and you cut that in half, and you keep cutting things in half until you must reach a place where there's something that you can't cut in half, and that's an atom. So that persisted for the next 2,500 years. The idea that reality is just space and atoms, and these atoms are indestructible. They just kind of form patterns, but they themselves are indestructible, uncuttable. And then in the 20th century, they actually realized, oh yeah, there are atoms. But then soon after that, they could look more deeply, and it turns out the atoms themselves are processes. They're not indestructible. And the farther they went into it, the less it becomes ungraspable processes which cannot be, they're not things. They're wavicles or something like that. So this is the conclusion the Buddha is coming to. He says, don't worry your pretty little head about this process, just that, because we really can't conceive of a process that has no things in it. We function on the idea of things, but there actually are no things. There is only process. And this process is rising, swirling, vanishing, etc., but not consisting of thingness. So that's the situation, and that's how you would resolve this issue of the idea of the soul as a monad, an indestructible monad versus a process. What goes on is the same swirling liquid process that's going on in this life. So this life, you don't have a little 3-year-old stored inside your body, and a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and a 6-year-old. They're all gone. Every moment of this life is vanishing, but conditioning the next moment. So in this life, there's no self, but it doesn't mean that there's a problem of conditioning influencing the quality or the personality structures of the next life. Yeah. Okay, well, we are closing in on the end of our time, so we will close up today, and I will go back to teaching our 10-day silent retreat at the monastery. We will see you next week.